Hello everyone, welcome to the latest in our webinar series. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you've participated in one of our webinars before, welcome back. It's really nice to have you. If this is your first time with us, I hope you can hear me. Thank you for taking time out to prioritise this very important debate today. What I'm going to be doing is introducing to you what's going to happen and talking you through how everything's going to work and how you can join in, more importantly, very shortly. I'm Sue Jones, and I'm responsible here at Warrington Voluntary Action for developing and delivering excellence in volunteer management training. And I'm here today with our technical director, Chris Huffey.
Hello.
Hello, Chris. I managed to get him to say hello without talking over him for once, which was good. Chris is here helping me to deliver the session and to coordinate the chat that's going on there on the screen and to pull together your comments and questions, which we hope there are going to be lots of later on. What we do with these is we aim to deliver a webinar designed specifically to focus on volunteer management issues approximately every other month, and we'll let you know later on how you can access the playbacks and resources from past presentations if you haven't already managed to find them before. Today as well, I'm delighted to welcome our two guest speakers who are on your screen, Emma Corrigan from Shelter and John Ramsey from Age UK, and I'll introduce you to them individually a little later on. So let's get started. For those of you that haven't realised, you should have a control panel or a bar with instructions on the right hand side of your screen, and what you've got there is a space to type comments in the chat section, and those comments will come through to Chris, and he'll be able to facilitate any questions that you have, respond to any queries, and we'll keep a note of any questions that you've got for our panel later on as well. So please make use of that today. That's really, really important. If you want to speak to us later, because we'd really love it if some of you would join us on the line here, then you just raise the hand icon if you want to speak. Don't just sit there and raise your hand by yourself, because we won't know. We actually need you to click on the raise your hand icon, which is on the screen as well. And for those of you that are on Twitter, please get on Twitter and please tweet about what's going on. Our hashtag is WVA webinar. It's really original, but it works. So please use it. So the way this is going to work today is that we'll have a quick background from me, nice and brief, I promise, and then we'll hear from each of our guests, and we'll have some questions and discussion in between. So hopefully lots of opportunity for you to interact with us today. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So let's get started. So what is the purpose of what we're doing here today? Why bother getting all you volunteer managers together at all? Well, the issue at hand, really, and what we wanted to focus on today is the fact that it's very likely that Volunteering England, the body originally set up to represent volunteering infrastructure, and to a certain extent indirectly volunteer management, will merge with the National Council for Voluntary Organisations at some point in the very near future. So we thought that this was actually going to throw up some quite big questions, and there's been some blogging about it, there's been some writing about it recently, and some informal discussions as well as formal. But what we really want to do today is to focus on how it's going to impact on volunteer managers. So some of the questions we were sort of considering were, will volunteering ultimately lose its voice if there isn't a dedicated body there to represent it? So what's going to happen there? And if that's going to happen, then what will happen to volunteer management? You know, we're already in a situation where volunteer management doesn't get a lot of attention as it is, so will there be even less focus on volunteer management issues than there already is now? And with these things in mind, therefore, what representation do we need? And as hopefully you're aware, NCVO and Volunteering England launched a consultation about a month ago, and so we've been asked to give our views and to share our concerns, and I suppose what we're thinking about here at Warrington Voluntary Action is, are we actually doing this, and are we doing this sufficiently, and are we sending through the messages that the decision makers really need to hear at this time? And the other questions that we're asking is, what should we be actually asking from them? What is it that we need our senior leaders and national representatives to be saying and doing? So this is just to give you a little bit of context for what we're here to do today, and our role really is to provide a platform for discussion. We're going to try and break down some of the bigger themes and enable you really to feed into the consultation process as a wider voice and as individuals. And what we like to do with these, just to break it up for you so it's not just sitting there listening to me talking, is we've got some polls for you to take part in. So we've got our first one coming up, and that should be appearing on your screen in a minute. And what you need to do really is just choose the response that you most agree with. And these are completely anonymous, but it is useful for us to get an idea of how people are feeling. So overall, do you see the merger as a disaster for all things volunteering and volunteer management, of little consequence, an opportunity, or something else? And I was going to say, if you're clicking on something else, then tell us what that is, but seeing as nobody has selected that, 20% of you, so we've got a couple of people coming through with that. We'll just leave that poll open for a couple more seconds. It seems to be that overwhelmingly people are saying, over 80% of you are saying that this is an opportunity, which is really, really good to hear. And that's incredibly positive, because that's definitely what we feel. It's definitely what our guests feel, and it's definitely what a lot of our volunteer management colleagues feel. Those of you that have clicked on something else, if you'd like to share your thoughts with us via the message, that would be really interesting, and we can pull some of that thought through. And we have got a couple of people that have selected that it's a disaster and of little consequence. So again, we'd really like to hear why you've selected that. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more information as well about what's happening in the wider picture, because I think in order to see where it is we need to go, it's a good idea to take stock of where we currently are as a profession. And here are some points that I sort of pulled through really when I was reading around and just chatting with people. You know, if we think about what's happening at the moment, volunteering has never had such a high profile. If we think about the coverage during the summer and the continuing discussions that are now reaching the mainstream media about volunteering, and yet still no one is talking about what it actually takes to organise, to lead and to manage volunteering. We're still talking about it as an end outcome, as an end product. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't think that I'm saying that we shouldn't be celebrating the achievements of volunteers. It's just that sometimes it's good to take that step back and to understand what's going on in the background. The other thing that I think is really significant is that historically volunteer management has had quite patchy representation really at the senior levels, and we know that there have been various initiatives over the last few years to try and you know, change this and to develop skills in the field. But really, it's not really taken us perhaps where we need to be. And I think, you know, we still have this lack of clarity about volunteer management and leadership. You know, what should we be called? What should the role involve? And perhaps more importantly, and perhaps this is quite significant really, where does it sit best within an organisational structure? So all of this stuff is great in a way because, you know, we've got the opportunity to say what we think. Volunteering is receiving this attention, but as we've already sort of established, just making positive noises about volunteering isn't enough if we actually want to change the way that volunteer involvement is resourced and led, and more importantly, how the role is perceived. I mean, what I believe is that we need a leadership that will talk about these things side by side. And we'll hear from one of our guests later who I know believes that too, that, you know, when we talk about volunteering, we also need to be talking about how that's led, managed and resourced. And for me, I think perhaps most importantly, we need to know that we're being represented by, you know, infrastructure, by senior leaders that get it, that they understand the significance of it, that the way they speak about it, you know, that they're using sort of positive terminology and they're thinking through the potential impact that they might make for the people who are listening. So this is your opportunity. We're being asked what we think, to give our opinion, and we should get involved. We have a chance to impress upon NCVO the importance of communicating the significance of these issues to their membership. We have an opportunity to get organisations to understand that volunteering isn't just an add-on, and it doesn't just happen in a bubble separately to the rest of its work. And, you know, this is a personal bugbear of mine, I guess, but it's a way to get organisations to go beyond simply saying things like volunteers are the lifeblood of our organisation, and then not actually backing that up and demonstrating that in the way that volunteering is understood by everybody in the organisation, volunteering is properly resourced, and volunteering, and therefore volunteer management, has representation at all management levels. So before we hear from our first guest, just based on that bit of background there, we've got another poll for you to take part in, and just out of interest, you know, because I talk to a lot of people, there's a lot of people writing about this stuff, and it feels like we're still really, really far away from achieving this vision. But I'm interested to find out, you know, what you guys think and whether you actually agree with that. So how far away do you believe we are from achieving these things at the moment? I've got another poll coming up on the screen there. Do you think we're very far away? Do you think that we're making some progress but it's really slow? Do you think that we're getting there? We're further on perhaps than we realise, and maybe we need to start banging our drum in a different way? Or actually, do you think, really, we're not that far away, we just need to keep pushing at this agenda and we'll get there? Okay, so just watching the responses coming in there, and it's quite mixed actually. Mostly we're split between some progress being made and getting there. So we're mostly split between B and C. And I think that's, we've got a 43% and a 36% on those two. So that's quite interesting. Yeah. If you can, that should be coming up for you to see on screen, because we can do that. How exciting. So majority of you think that some progress is being made very slowly and that we are getting there. So I think it really sort of reflects on how much work there is to do, doesn't it? And the fact that we have taken steps, but it emphasises for me how important it is to be part of this consultation. Okay. So I think that's probably enough from me, and hopefully given you a little bit of background there to provide some context. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, Emma Corrigan. Emma, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hello, Emma. I love it when it works, don't you? Emma is volunteer coordinator at Shelter, and based in Manchester, and she's also a regular contributor to the Thoughtful Thursdays tweet chat that we have going on. Tune in tomorrow. It is Thursday. She blogs about volunteer management issues quite a lot on the IVO website, and she's also part of the Volunteer Management Champions team. Emma, I know you have some thoughts about what you'd like to see from the merger and suggestions about what you think these two national bodies should be thinking about. And when we chatted about this, we discussed about the importance of being able to trust that the feedback would be listened to. You felt that that was quite important. You know, it's all very well us kind of shouting around amongst ourselves. So if you'd like to just kind of give us a bit of a scene setter, a bit of context to tell us about why you think we should be making the most of this opportunity and what it is you want to share with us today.
Sure. Hello, everyone. This is quite spooky. It's weird. I'm on the phone and I'm talking to everyone, so hello. So as a bit of a background, I've been sort of working in the charity sector for a long time now in various different jobs, from marketing to grant management. And over the last 5 years, I've moved into volunteer management and volunteer coordination. And, you know, I have no qualification in this. I, you know, have not come from a dynasty of volunteer managers. It just kind of happened in the organisation I used to work for that I became the person that did it. And after a while of feeling completely on my own and isolated and not really sure of who I was and what I was supposed to be doing, other than obviously the stuff I was supposed to be doing, I decided I needed to kind of find out who else was out there. And that's what led me to start using Twitter and social media and engage with the sector around me. And I realised really quickly that it was very easy to contribute and that people are out there listening and do want to talk. But sometimes when we're on our own in our projects getting on with the day-to-day, it can feel like there's nobody there to talk to. So for me, the stuff we've been doing with Sue and Warrington has been a massive improvement personally for me on a day-to-day sort of communication level with humans. It's been great, but also I think, you know, I'm already seeing the changes we're making. So Sue and I had a really good chat the other day about talking on the webinar today and what kind of things I was going to talk about. And I ended up coming up with this little motto, which was speak up, stand out, and have faith. It sounds very dramatic. I was quite pleased with that, and I wrote it down when I saw the idea. And it's kind of, it's no great shakes. It's not sort of the new, I don't know, I can't really say, but it's simple. And I mean, I thought what I share with you is how I've seen all this, because I've seen blog posts go up from the NCBO and people saying, what are your ideas? What should we do? What's the merger? And I'm sitting there thinking, I have no idea, actually. I can think of some stuff, but I don't know if it's the right stuff, and I don't know if people are going to shoot me down if I suggest it or not. So I thought, hell, I'm just going to go for it. So there are three kind of sort of areas I think that we need to sort of think about speaking up, standing out, and having faith. In terms of, firstly, on the ground, you know, what I want to see is that we're getting good communications coming up and down the ladder so that we can face, this is where my faith comes into it, I don't know, it sounds a bit spiritual, but I don't mean it in a spiritual way, in interactions, and we can see what actions and changes are taking place without having to dig for information. Quite often I think us volunteer managers have to really go looking for stuff, and it's not thrown in our faces. It can be hard to speak up for our profession when we're not sure that we're speaking for everyone. So taking part in things like this means we share our opinions and make sure that we are on the same page. And everything I keep doing, I keep finding out, oh gosh, there's more people who think exactly the same as me. And we're everywhere. And then on the ground, we need to be using this information to be change makers within our organisation. You know, I'd love for somebody to waltz into senior management at Shelter and make them really understand volunteering and its importance throughout the organisation, and educating up, down, left and right to show worth and value. But actually, that's me. It's got to be me. And so it's about taking the reins to do that. And that's where evidence comes in, and how, you know, the better the evidence I collect and show of my work, the more powerful I'm going to be when I speak up and stand out. And it's that thing about sort of, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway. Isn't that some kind of cheesy self-help book? But it's about improving confidence.
Cheesy ones are always spot on though, Emma, that's the thing.
Absolutely. You know, what colour's your parachute? We need to improve confidence as volunteer managers. I think we feel quite in a shaky position to rock the boat in our organisations, because we're always convinced that, you know, when the axe falls, it's going to be our department that gets cut first, because we don't make real money. We do all sorts of other wonderful things, but we don't make cold hard cash, and sometimes that puts us in a slightly wobbly position. But so far, standing up and speaking out has done me nothing but good. But I try to do it with a very positive attitude. So yeah, so that's on the ground. I realise I'm rambling a little bit. Then we have organisers. Is that all right, Sue? Am I okay?
Keep going. It's brilliant.
So on the ground, then we move on to organisationally. Thank you. My new little thing popped up there. So this is talking about, you know, a holistic change. We need to see a national body directly targeting senior management bodies within the charity sector, with education and clear policies about the role of the profession. So it's almost like we're knocking on that door up saying, well, this is good practice, this is what volunteer managers should be doing. And then, you know, so senior management turn around and say, says who? And you can say, well, actually, our national body says so, and we're singing from the same hymn sheet with the national body. And I think sometimes that we feel there isn't that power to our arms sometimes when we show that we're doing the right thing, that there isn't a big brother that can back us up sometimes. I think, you know, organisational change needs to happen about dispelling this myth that anyone can be a volunteer manager. You know, there are skills and competencies needed for a volunteering service, and quite often it's the nicest person or the cheapest person that gets put into post when a volunteer manager is needed. And don't get me wrong, that's how I got here today, so I'm quite grateful that that does happen. But that quite often means that someone gets put in a role that's not necessarily the best fit for it. And then, of course, the volunteering doesn't necessarily succeed or have, you know, meet the objectives that the organisation and the volunteers want, and it's yet another reason to poo-poo it. And it's quite weird, really, because I don't think you'd find somebody saying, okay, well, we need a new finance officer, and you say, oh, well, we've got Peter here. He can't really use a computer, and he doesn't understand numbers, but he's amazing at jazz and interpretive dance. And he's a really good laugh. Shall we give him the job? And and they wouldn't give him the job. But I tell you what, if it was a volunteer manager, I think jazz and interpretive dance would probably get you the job in a heartbeat. And again, and I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing always.
I think we should be adding it onto the National Occupational Standards, actually.
Interpretive dance, definitely. We need to be seeking out champions within management level, within our organisations and outside our organisations, to share good practice amongst their networking circles. I mean, we've all been on LinkedIn and seen all these groups and institutes of such and such and whatever. And where are our spokespeople within those organisations? And it's that thing of we want to drive for volunteering to be on the agenda throughout an organisation. And I think this needs a top-down approach just as much as it does from a bottom-up. And then also sort of smashing that myth about volunteering being just, you know, the cold hard cash issue. And that's where, again, you know, if we've got a national body collating excellent evidence and hard facts and statistics about the value of volunteering, again, it gives us this power to move forward. And then the third spur of what I think that I'd like to see a national body doing for us is this sort of political or overarching role. And it's that thing of being a national voice, talking to politicians and decision makers and just banging on the door, challenging those preconceptions and seeking to offer this unified voice that represents all of us, and getting in those doors. Because let's face it, you know, whilst we're busy looking after our volunteers, writing our policies and procedures, educating up on a ground level within our office, let alone head office, then moving up, how the hell are we supposed to be going to government as well and sorting things out up there? That's where I think it would be really useful. And then looking at things like developing professional development offers for volunteer managers and highlighting the worth of showing the work that we do as being a worthwhile activity. And I get it, you know, I don't think any of this is rocket science. I don't think anyone's just seen something I've said and gone, oh, gosh, I'd never thought of that. I think we're all thinking these kind of things. And this is a bit of a wish list, and I can imagine it would be terrifying for NCVO to suddenly say, and Volunteering England to say, I'm demanding all of this stuff. But I would be really interested to see how they feel about these different levels and where they want to commit to it and what they're feeling about it. And then the last little bit about it was, I thought it was like giving permission I was thinking about in terms of, you know, how do we give ourselves the permission to do what we do? Because I think sometimes, you know, I think I'm a great example. There was a blog from NCVO saying, what should we do about the merger and da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't comment on it. I think I might have tweeted or commented on another blog post saying, do you know what, I haven't commented because I'm too scared to. Not because I was scared of getting in trouble, but because I was just like, I don't really know how to say what I want to say. And then a couple of volunteer managers said, just say it anyway, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. And I suddenly realised that I was not giving myself the permission to interact, I was stopping myself. So I kind of gave myself a bit of a kick for that one. Said, come on, just have a go and find out. And look what's happened, I've ended up speaking at a webinar. So, you know.
That is what will happen to all of you.
It's gone full circle.
You start commenting.
Then also, you know, so permission to us, but then we've got to give permission to our organisations to a certain way. How do we empower those organisations we work in to feel free to make positive decisions rather than worrying? Because, you know, I think our organisations do worry about volunteering and the risks and the damage they're going to do to us and all these things they're going to break and wreck and everything. And it's just like, come on now. We need to give them the freedom and the education to understand that they can get on with things. And then also, how do we represent the sector and strive to operate on all these three levels above? Because we can't do all of these things at once, but perhaps we can all think, do you know what, there's something I can do in each of these three areas that I can do to get involved with. And, you know, I'm not quite sure what the next step is, but I think that's what we discuss and how we talk to each other should help us to find those steps that we need to take and that one voice that we want to share. So yeah, so that's kind of my little bit.
Thank you, Emma. That was really, really interesting. No, I think you make some fantastic points, very, very well. And I think I love the way that you've broken it down into the sort of on the ground organisationally and then the sort of overarching themes, because I think that's what's really important about all this stuff. You know, we're all quite passionate about it, but we need to actually sort of break it down into meaningful chunks, if you like, so that we can then go and target and sell it, you know, where it needs to be sold. Really interested to find out if we've got some comment coming in and some questions about things that you've been saying.
Absolutely. And equally, if people completely disagree with me, I'd love to know, because these are just the things I've come up from just pondering myself, and I could be off the mark. And I trust my fellow volunteer managers to change my mind if they think I'm wrong.
Absolutely. I'm just having a look to see what comment we've got coming in. And I think that we've got a comment from Anne who's saying that funders are now demanding social accounting. When you're talking about the demonstrating the value and the evidence gathering, because I'm really interested in that side of things as well. I think that is a way to sort of speak to senior managers and decision makers in a language that they perhaps understand, isn't it? And I think we can have debates about talking about translating the value of number of hours donated in terms of volunteering time, because that's the starting point often, isn't it? You actually did a really good blog not that long ago about measuring impact on this very subject, and I think we can talk to people maybe in kind of monetary terms, in financial value, and then that's a way in to then talk about the other stuff, the other impacts as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that stuff's actually really, really important. Have we got many comments coming in, Chris? No? Okay. I'm hoping that you're all saving them for your tweeting or you're musing over what Emma's been saying. I was sort of thinking as you were chatting really about the permission thing, because I find that really, really interesting. And I do a lot of work, as you know, with volunteer managers individually and through training, and this comes up all the time. And I just wonder, sort of what point we're going to get to before people, will start to sort of take that step forward. And I think people have, in as much as sort of joining us here today. But the fact that we've not got people wanting to kind of come on and ask a question, and maybe it's genuinely that people don't have a question, I don't know.
Absolutely.
But I'd love to hear more from what people have to say.
And I think, I think it's almost that thing of, okay, well, how committed are you to yourself as well as to volunteering? And I sound like some kind of spiritualist now, but as in terms of, okay, I've made a commitment to myself that every Thursday, I even if it's one tweet or one comment on iVote, I get involved in Thoughtful Thursdays. And then off the back of that, it's just that thing of what am I going to do? If I don't do anything at the moment, listening to a webinar is a massive step forward, and that's enough. You're here and you're listening, and what will that turn into next? And equally, it's that thing of it's being kind to yourself and saying, I'm doing this for me. I'm not afraid to do that, and I think that sometimes it can feel really hard to give yourself time. Even this is still work. This is my working day. I'm not doing this just because I like it. I'm doing it because it's my job as well. And it's great to be able to do the two.
I think that's it, and I think this is where it links with professional development, and we've spoke about this on previous webinars, that professional development isn't just about going on a training course or qualifications. In fact, in the modern workplace, it's got to be much more about the connections, the networking, the learning on the job, the reflection time, and all those things that we don't give ourselves permission for because we're too busy making sure the volunteers are okay.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes it's just about a little kind of a bit of a rethink or a little bit of a shift in our emphasis. Just a little bit of time invested can actually, produce, a greater impact.
Absolutely.
We have got a couple of questions coming in. Karen's asking, what do you think about whether senior managers need more sort of training around, the kind of volunteer management issues, and whether you've any experience of that and whether you think that might work?
Yes, is the quick answer. I mean, I think it's really interesting, no matter how big or small your organisation is, it's highly likely, and I don't mean to be negative, this is my one negative, is that you'll probably find that senior management love the idea of volunteering, but don't get it, and don't really understand the value of volunteer management, I don't think. And it's certainly something that if you're not a loud and confident person as a volunteer manager, it can be really hard to do that. And I think that unfortunately, at the moment, it is our responsibility to be that person. It is us that have to go and knock on that door and say, do you know what a volunteer manager really does? Let me teach you. At the moment, that really is our job to do because there's no one else to do it. And I think that that's something that would really help with, potential national body, with some guidance and backing to be able to go in and knock on that door and educate, knowing that you're speaking on behalf of everyone in the country rather than just you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got that track.
No, you're not at all. I think you're right. I think so. What you're saying is that this could be something that we feed into the consultation in terms of a need. There's a gap there, and maybe we need to disguise it a little bit. In terms of how we present it to very senior managers. It needs to be presented in a way that that maybe kind of fits around other training and development that they're doing. I mean, I think bodies like Akivo, for me, have got a part to play in a lot of this, the chief executive's body, because, and when I was doing some research recently looking at kind of qualifications at a senior level around running a voluntary organisation, and I can't find anything that really dedicates a lot of time, if any at all, to managing volunteers.
Yeah.
And considering they're probably the majority of your workforce as a charity, it's actually quite incredible, really. It
is, yeah. And I think that it's again this sort of slightly offhand attitude within the sector towards volunteering, in that, it's free people. We don't have to give it as much care and concern, and again, it's just that thing of every time we hear somebody talking about volunteering in a way that it doesn't suit us, like we use things, not people, if we hear people discussing, how volunteers play a role, we don't need to do that, it's just volunteers. That, that's the very groundwork, the ground action that we can have to say, whoa, that's not the way we talk about it around here or anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Emma, I just wanted to interject. No, go on. No, I was just going to say about that we use things, not people. I was just going to kind of explain to people what that is.
Oh, yes, sorry.
No, it's just in case people haven't seen that. It's just there's been a bit of a sort of a, I don't know, I couldn't really call it a campaign, but just a sort of lots of stomping around on Twitter from quite a lot of us about, sort of when we hear people talk about using volunteers, and we know that's not what people mean when they say it, but we just want to challenge that as a starting point and say, don't use that word. That's not what you mean. Use a different word, because we use things, not people. So that's just for the benefit of those who haven't come across that before. Sorry. Carry on. I stopped you mid-flow. It was very rude.
But it's quite all right. I think, I don't know, I've probably finished on that. I've forgotten what I was saying now anyway.
Well, I tell you what, we've got a couple of points coming in here. I don't know what you think about, it sort of emphasises really what you've been saying. Lisa's saying that a lot of the answers that are coming through on the merger consultation document, so this is the actual document that NCVO and Volunteering England have put up, are quite bland, really. I mean, and I actually revisited it again this morning just to see, has anything new been put up on there? Is there anything else being discussed other than please can meetings not be in London? Well, you see, for me, what that does is that just demonstrates that all we're doing is whinging. We're using that platform as a space not to say anything intelligent, not to say anything valuable or worthwhile. And I'm not saying that those things don't matter. It's just, and I don't mean to dismiss the individuals that have perhaps feel that that is an important issue. But when you look on there and that's all you see, and you don't see anything about all this other stuff that we know is really, really important, what that would say is, actually that stuff isn't important.
Absolutely, and that's why it took me hesitating and not writing a comment, going, because I don't know what to write, followed up by various other people challenging when we say, just have a go anyway, followed up by us actually talking for 15 to 20 minutes when we were starting to think about this webinar, for me to actually even get an idea of what I think my answers are in my head. Those on the ground, organisationally, politically stuff. I didn't even know that was what I wanted until I started thinking about it. So it's that thing of it's so hard, and I find that the merger blog post and the questions that are being asked are the most nebulous or sort of, open, safe questions. What would you like? And it's that thing about when you're talking about good parenting skills, that it's never really a great idea to offer your child an infinite option. You know, what would you like?
Definitely not with my child,
because,
no.
you know, what would you like to eat? That you could get, you know, that could be anything in the world.
Yeah.
If you say, well, would you like to eat vegetables, meat, potatoes? You know, you're putting parameters around it. So I sort of feel very much.
Sure.
I think the blog from Thursdays, I was going to say Thirsty Thursdays, which is another networking group I'm aware of, slightly different.
Like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did do a blog post on Thoughtful Thursday about this, didn't we? What were the
questions? Questions that we'd like to answer, because it's so hard
Sure.
to answer when you don't even know what the question you're being asked is. But anyway, you know, from anything I've said today, if anything rings true with anybody or meet somebody else's thoughts, feel free to take my words and use them on the comments blog and put them up there. You know, because as far as I'm concerned, what I'm saying is exactly the same stuff I'm hearing in conversations with other volunteer managers.
True.
So, you know, yeah.
I agree with you. I think a couple of things that I've sort of captured from what you've been saying there is that what I'd like to just reiterate to people is when you said it's our responsibility to be that person. So I think this is where we are, is like no one's going to do this for you.
No.
So you either care about it and you're going to do something about it, or you just need to carry on because nothing will change.
And it doesn't have to be, oh, let me book myself in with a chief exec who I've never met before and tell him my life story and tell him what's wrong with his world or hers. Could it be, do you actually send an internal comms newsletter once a month telling them what volunteers have been up to? Are you sharing good practice amongst your team, whether they want it or not? You know, and it's that thing of, do you have a presence within your organisation? And it can start really gently, but if you're just sending information out, it doesn't, you know, you don't have to force people to read it. But then, you know, further down the line, you can then say to the chief executive, well, what do you think of these, you know, monthly newsletters I've been sharing volunteering best practice around the organisation? How do you feel about that? And is there anything you'd like me to tell you about? And that's a way of going in rather than turning up on the doorstep and saying, right.
Yeah, we need to talk about volunteer management. I think the other thing that I thought was significant about what you were saying was that how you said about you didn't even know that that was what you thought until you started to discuss it. And that's really, really important, I think, for everybody, is to get talking about this stuff. So don't treat it as something that other people talk about. That's something that the volunteer management champions talk about, or that's something that only Association of Volunteer Managers talk about. We're all supposed to talk about it with one another. And I think, actually, Simon's made a really good point here about, you know, the potential that we have with the social media tools we have at our disposal. And like you said, just setting a bit of time aside once a week as a starting point. Let's see what's going on. Let's see how I can join in. It's a very, very supportive community in that respect.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've been so surprised when I, you know, like when I tweeted saying, oh, I don't really know how to respond to this blog from NCVO, the people did turn around and say, hey, it's okay, don't worry about it, but still do it anyway. Really nice.
We're right behind you.
Just get on with it.
I think, well, Simon's making a good point here as well, because what he's saying is that our organisations need to understand this, and maybe that's a whole other webinar in terms of getting the buy-in around, you know, social media.
And I think when Susan spoke at the webinar, your last webinar,
Susan Ellis, yes.
Yeah, Susan Ellis, and she thought, you know, she's got a book about educating up, and you know, she made some really good points about it and about how and really empowering comments, and I think that's a whole nother, you know, kettle of fish, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Well, I think we've got a resource there. You know, people can listen back to the playback from when Susan was with us. We've got that as a resource. There's some brilliant tips. You know, building on some of the things you were just saying there about, you know, kind of the communication aspect. You know, and these are all part of this bigger picture within which we're working here. Okay. Thank you so much, Emma.
My pleasure.
We'll come back to you at the end, hopefully, for a bit more discussion later on. But we appreciate your thoughts. We've got another. You're very welcome. Thank you. We've got another poll for you, because I think building on some of the things that Emma was talking about there, and some of the ideas around what we might want from a kind of political, sort of overarching organisational level, and the way that we could be represented. What do you think is the most important aspect that NCVO and Volunteering England should be campaigning on for volunteer management? So we've come up with some examples based on Emma's presentation here. demonstrating the worth and the value aspect, directly targeting senior managers and associations, dispelling this myth that just anyone can do the role, educating organisations around this whole thing that donated time, i.e. volunteering, is just as valuable to your organisation as donated funds. This is a big issue, I think. Or do you just think that actually this is just a starting point, that all of the above is what they should be campaigning on because they're all actually interconnected with one another? So hopefully that is on your screen at the moment. Let's just have a quick look at the results coming in. So the majority of you are going for the all of the above, accepting that this is all interconnected, but after that there's nearly 20% of you are picking out the issue about donated time versus donated funds. And in a way, I don't know what you guys think about this, perhaps you can tell me whether you think that that's a starting point, that's a way in. I listened to a presentation delivered by Rob Jackson on Monday evening at GMCVO at the launch of Voluntary Arts Toolkit, and it was a really good event. And Rob was sort of saying that in a way it's a good time to be paying attention to these issues and to getting organisations focused on the fact that, you know, donations are decreasing and the cuts in funding, etc. So actually it's a good opportunity for organisations to actually be shifting their emphasis and looking at volunteering and volunteer engagement as a way to build resources. But it's, you know, obviously, you know, as Emma was saying in her presentation there, it's difficult if you're that person. So building an evidence base for that kind of thing might be a really good starting point in terms of what we need from a national organisation. Okay, let's move on. We've got John Ramsey lined up for you now. John is Head of Volunteering at Age UK, and I'm very delighted to welcome him. Hello, John, can you hear me?
I can now hear you, Sue, thank you.
Hello, John, thank you for joining us. John, oh, jolly good. You were one of the founders of the Association of Volunteer Managers, and you're very well known for speaking up about volunteer management issues. Very well known. We're delighted to have you. You regularly blog about issues, and I always think with your blogs in particular that you raise some of the kind of the bigger picture questions and some of the more challenging issues, which I think is really great because I think it gets us to think more broadly about the volunteer management role. I like that about what you do. I just hope that people are reading them, senior managers in particular. And when we were chatting, you were talking about the significance of getting us involved in this sort of consultation as individuals, and a lot of the things that we've been discussing there with Emma. But actually we talked about this idea of the collective voice being really, really significant, and you used the phrase critical mass, which I quite liked. And then you sent me a draft of a blog which began talking about British cycling, which was obviously the next step along the line. So maybe you'd like to sort of start off by explaining a little bit about why you did that.
I think the first reason for doing that was just to leap on the Olympic bandwagon last time.
Why not?
Yeah, well, exactly. But really just to think back about British cycling and to think that, you know, in 1996 in Atlanta they only got two bronze medals, and now in Beijing and in London, you know, it's a real gold rush. British cycling is held up as, you know, the most successful sport for us in terms of medals. And asking the question why, and, you know, anybody who's been reading about cycling over the last few weeks, I think the answer is quite simple. It's about well-managed investment, ensuring, you know, the cyclists have the best equipment, the best training, the best diet, and access to the best support framework. And actually that relates to everything. If you give people the best tools, you know, the best knowledge and opportunities, then that invariably leads to better outcomes. And we know that's the same in volunteering. If you invest in the volunteers and the management of those volunteers, then you get better outcomes. And then you have the next thought, well, why is that such a well-kept secret? Why don't decision makers and policy makers realize that? And I think we can think of the reasons why that happens, but I was more interested about what we could do about it. Because I think the penny is slowly dropping. I think you alluded to that in the introduction, that it is slowly changing, but it's a very slow change. And choice here, I think. We can either let the decision makers, our chief officers, trustees, work it out for themselves, and in the meantime, we can all sit around and have a really good moan about it. And let's face it, there's nothing more than moaning about something. And I wholeheartedly adhere to that concept.
Yeah.
Or the other alternative is actually, and this is what Emma was talking about, was about taking initiative and actually us as a group of people doing something about it. And what really struck me was I got an email from LinkedIn, the professional networking site, last year, telling me that 300,000 people have volunteer management listed as a skill. And I read that. I've got 300,000 people. Now, I don't remember seeing 100,000 people on blogs or at conferences or at networks or on Yahoo message forums. I just do not see these 300,000 people. So, and we know there are hundreds of people out there who manage volunteers. What are they? And how can we get together and create this critical mass? So I think one of the things that changes people's opinion, policies, is if a large group of people make that decision, encourage them to make that decision. So I guess when we were talking, I think what was coming up in our mind was it's all well and me ranting on about this, but actually what is it as us as people can actually do? I think that it's the doing that counts. It's not just the talking. The talking's just the first step. So I think it's about going back to basics and going back to how do we get more people involved in talking about volunteer management, and coming together as a group. Because I think we could all be forgiven for thinking that actually volunteer managers at the moment is really seen as quite a niche role, a bit like modern-day lighthouse keepers, where basically a modern-day lighthouse keeper turns up, flicks a few switches to make sure that the lights are still flashing in the lighthouse, and then disappears for months on end. And I think the profile of volunteer managers is quite similar to that. So thinking about, first of all, what we as a group of people can do, just in terms of getting together and about supporting each other, and about becoming more involved in volunteer management. And I think you can see on the screen there, a starting point of thinking about what can we do. So, tweet about Thoughtful Thursdays, reply to UK VPN blogs, post on UK VPN, respond to blogs on Ivo, write your own blog. And there's a really good blog on Ivo from Big D Small called Getting Thoughtful About Blogging, and it's a really good starting point. If you don't know how to blog or know what, have a read of that, and it really gives you some great ideas.
It is a brilliant blog. I'm sorry, I just need to interject there.
Yeah.
And it's a great starting point. We'll make sure, everyone, that you get kind of links to various resources and things that we've sort of mentioned in the follow-up, and I have included some of them on the presentation later. Sorry, John, I interrupted your flow there.
And I mean, there are local volunteer manager networks going on at the moment that are quite often set up by volunteers, so attending those networks, or setting up your own network. If any of you are on UK VPN, you'll see that Adam in Manchester has just recently set up his own network, which is absolutely fantastic. That's what we want to, want people to do. And I think encourage other colleagues to do the same. I think the important point for me, and hopefully, if everybody can take away something from this, is after today, if everybody can just get one or two colleagues who don't get involved in these sort of debates or forums, but who manage volunteers, if they can just get involved, that will just create and start building this momentum of volunteer management. So for me, the starting point was really thinking about how can we just get a critical mass of volunteers going and starting to talk about these things. But obviously, there is that next step that Emma was talking about, that Emma was saying about how scared she was about, initially wanting to respond to the consultation. And I think it's great if we all, talk to each other, but at the end of the day, we're just talking to each other. And I think the next step is about how we broaden our horizons, because it is a big bad world out there, and sometimes it's very big and it's very bad. And if we want to encourage and influence policymakers quite often it does feel you're essentially sticking your head above the parapet with a target on your forehead saying, "Shoot me, please." And that can be very, very scary for people. But if we've got a group of people who do it together, then obviously we'll gain confidence from that, we'll gain strength from that, and I think we'll become more visible as a group of people. So I think thinking about how do we broaden our horizon, I think there's three things to remember. I think first of all, recognizing that for me, whenever volunteering is talked, volunteer management is obviously part of the deal. Secondly, I think we've got to remember that volunteering is cross-cutting. So it cross-cuts all government departments, it cross-cuts the public sector, the private sector, and obviously our sector as well. And it cuts across many issues that sometimes I don't realise volunteering is a part of. And quite often what I do, I go to some of the policy statements Volunteer in England are making.
Yeah.
And it's from there, and I read, oh yeah, I didn't realise a particular issue included volunteering. And so I get a better understanding about what issues are then covered by volunteer management. And for me, the third issue is that a lot of the ways we can influence are influencing through the media. And realising one of the driving forces for the media is increasing readership. So if an issue gets more comments or more likes, then that particular media source will give it more attention. So think about the things we could do. First of all, I think we could comment more on media articles, on stories, raising the issue of volunteer management. So looking at sources like Third Sector, Guardian, Voluntary Sector, Civil Society. And if we can't comment, then think about, well, why don't we like a story or like a comment? I mean, if you look at the moment, quite often you get a few comments, and the comments might be liked by 2 or 3 people. But just imagine if someone put on there a comment about a story regarding volunteer management, and suddenly 56 people liked that story. Now the techie people at Third Sector will probably go, oh, look at that, why has that happened? And I think we can create a momentum and buzz about that. I think it's also important to respond to opinion pieces about volunteering. So Rob Jackson's got a volunteering column on Third Sector. So we should be responding to things like that, because again, the editorial staff will look at how many comments articles are getting. Obviously, and this is the one we started off on, was about responding to sector questions and consultations, and the VE NCVO one. And obviously, I will be encouraging everybody on this webinar after this to go on there and tell them what you think. It is really, really important. My personal opinion is, if we don't get in there at the start of the merger, and as they're starting to formulate their vision and then their strategic objectives, it's going to be very hard to change that 2 years down the line.
Yes.
So we need to create that change now. What else can we do? I think we can become members of organisations. I would obviously strongly encourage people to join the Association of Volunteer Managers, but also join Volunteer in England and NCVO. Because as a member, you do have a voice, and you've got the opportunity to challenge that membership organisation's strategy or its vision. And if you don't like that membership strategy or vision, well, as a member, you can get more involved. So you can get on a working group, or even apply to become a trustee or to that organisation. And I think more than at any time, and was it Simon who raised this? Through social media, it's so much easier to directly raise issues with policymakers, whether it's local or nationally, or with the Cabinet Office. Nick Hurd has his own Twitter address. Now, I'd hate to do Nick Hurd a disservice, but I'm sure it's not him personally checking it the whole time, although I'm sure he does check it occasionally. But it's there that we can use it, and we can target messages at him. So I think there's a lot of things that we as volunteer managers individually and collectively we can do. And I think there's a whole number of reasons why we can't do them. The lack of time, or it's not. I'm scared what my organisation will think, etc., etc., etc. But I think if we're passionate about volunteering and we're passionate about the power of volunteer management, then ultimately I don't think we've really got an excuse not to do these things. And I'm not asking people to do every single one of them, because that's impossible. There's a number of those things I've mentioned that I don't do. I hold my hand up, and I know I should get more involved in Thoughtful Thursdays, but
And you will after today.
yes, I will after today.
I will come and find you.
I do think it's really people get involved somehow.
Yeah.
Because it is our responsibility, because no one else will do it for us. The only people who will do it is for ourselves. And just going back to, thinking about how the Association of Volunteer Managers started up, it was because a small group of us realised that there was this gap, that no one was talking about volunteer management, and realised no one else was going to do it unless we set it up ourselves. And I think that's why we have to take it forward.
Yeah.
So that's my rant over with, if you'd like to call it that.
I think it's very considered. And it was very articulate, and it was very, very worthwhile. No, I think there's a lot in there, John, and I like the way, that you've sort of broken it down again, like Emma did, into this sort of what can we do as a starting point. So if people are looking for a way in, to start to just join that community, and let's just, even if we just start by talking to one another, then we can start to really figure it out what it is we really think. Picking up on Emma's point from, I read the consultation paper and I didn't really know what I thought about it. And only by discussing it with your peers are you going to come to any sort of formed conclusion. And that's where tweeting, blogging, writing, chatting about these things actually really, really helps. And it is time well spent, and it is time invested in you and your profession. And then how you've sort of got these sort of step up, if you like, with the broadening horizons, and if you're in a position to do that and you feel ready to do that, let's start commenting more widely. I absolutely agree with this, and I mean I've been chatting with the Guardian voluntary recently to try and get more volunteer management pieces featured, and they've been really, really receptive to it. And I've done that simply through Twitter, simply by being cheeky and just tweeting them back and saying, where are your articles about volunteer management? Because it's just, you can only try. And actually I've engaged in conversation. I'm in a regular email exchange with them now about it. We've got, I'm sort of getting them to feature different bloggers. And so I think is this whole thing about if you don't ask, you don't get, actually. And we feel like we put these sort of pretend barriers and pretend walls up because we think, oh no, that's something that other people do. That's something that the leaders do, or the associations do, or the big people do, but actually we're part of that membership, and we have to, we have to play our part in that, I guess. I'm going on my rant now.
and I think there's a lot of issues that we need to clarify within volunteer management, around professional accreditation and professional development. But I think unless we get the basics right, unless we can actually show that when we're talking about volunteer management, we are actually talking about a large group of people, then I feel those more intellectual debates, I suppose, if you like to call them, then actually where's the value in that? Because it'll be quite easy for people to turn around to us and say, well, actually, how many volunteer managers are out there? And if we can't show to them it is a large group of people, then no one's going to be interested.
No, I think that's it. I mean, we have to have these things gathered. We have to have this information ready, and maybe this is where the national infrastructure body can help. It's clearly where something like Association of Volunteer Managers can help us and support us, I think, as well. I think going back as well to what you were saying about using the media, Simon again has made quite an interesting point. He's sort of basically said here that for a while now, media like Ivo and Twitter has helped me more than being part of a membership organisation like Volunteering England. So we need a national lead agency to champion our profession and campaign for the resources to support us. So it's almost sort of, he seems to be saying, and I'm sure Simon will tell me if I've not got this right, that actually the community, the peer networking is actually given more support than any top-down support. And I think that's a sea change in what's happening anyway, just in the workplace. I do think that's part of a bigger agenda around learning and development. But is it good enough, would be my question.
Well, I think obviously, I think peer networking is one of the strongest ways of supporting each other. I think the question is how infrastructure organisations can tap into the knowledge that these peer networks create and gather information and data about, in this case, volunteer management, that to press forward. You know, I don't think, say, Volunteer in England should necessarily be running, you know, action support groups all over across the country. But what they should be doing is maybe developing these, helping support these networks to gather information from them and use that information.
Yeah, there needs to be a link there somewhere, doesn't there? Because it almost feels as though, like, as a volunteer manager, these things are just sort of happening all by themselves. And I think one of the big things I feel quite strongly about is that, you know, we don't end up with just a set of initiatives being generated that are delivered for volunteer managers. You know, and that it is that sort of top-down approach, particularly around things like qualifications and, you know, professional development, that there is a proper consultation and kind of, you know, sort of talking to people properly on the ground. And by that, you know, I don't mean any disrespect to someone like you in your position as a head of volunteering, but quite often when you go to these sort of groups, you know, and these sort of working parties, it's very rare that you will get sort of someone who's a local-based, you know, kind of volunteer manager who's sort of working at that level, and they're the people who are dealing with the day-to-day stuff, and they're the people that kind of need to be represented. So yeah, I agree with you. I think there just needs to be a lot more kind of links made and a lot more building on what already exists, rather than any sort of top-down initiatives, really. There are a couple of comments coming in from people about supporting volunteer management as a profession and the professional development side of this, though. And I think for me, a lot of it is around, I don't know if you agree, it is more about the kind of the spokesperson kind of role and speaking to what I was saying before about the Akivo membership, and for NCVO to talk to their membership, because in a way I think there's an opportunity here where, you know, we can start to really embed volunteering throughout an organisation. So NCVO are in a great position with their membership to really sort of demonstrate, well, what are you doing with volunteering? You know, how does that fit within your organisation? Is that managed? Is that resourced? And so that I think there's a way for the two voices with Volunteer in England to really come together here. And I don't know.
Well, I mean, we mustn't forget that the vast majority of NCVO members will have on their staff role at some point people who manage volunteers. The question is, are those volunteer managers within those organisations involved in how that membership organisation is consulting with NCVO? And I suggest the answer is probably not at all. And that's a big problem.
So they're not almost kind of, it's just like, volunteer management is like the missing link, isn't it? It is the thing that sort of just gets, it's like broken, it's like it's forgotten about, and it almost needs sort of like bringing back in, and this is an opportunity for it to do it, but it doesn't get thought about in that way, and this is what we're having to push through.
Yeah, and I started thinking about why is that, and then I went off on a complete tangent about.
Then your head hurt a lot. Yeah.
Right, and actually, whilst the why is important, I think what's more important is what are we going to do about it, about getting more involved. So I mean, I've spoken to Volunteer in England about what they should be doing about volunteer management, you know, and their role within that, and you know, arguing that one of the problems is, what we do know is that volunteering can happen without any management. It can happen.
Yes. Okay.
Well, it's another question. You know, and that's the problem. Many organisations see volunteering happening with very little management support. I think brilliant. Got it sussed. Don't need to invest in it. And we need to raise the argument, say, actually, if you really want to achieve your charitable objectives properly and effectively, the way to do it is to invest properly in your volunteering, and you'll be amazed at how, you know, how amazingly well you'll improve on your targets.
I think that's it, isn't it? Organisations are sort of settling for, oh well, it's working. We'll not fix that. We'll just leave that quietly ticking over until a problem occurs, or until suddenly, you know, we have a mass exodus of volunteers, or until the funding runs out, or whatever. You know, and they don't choose to address it in that way.
And that's why I think that there is a two-pronged attack to be taken here. I think there is a role for individual volunteer managers making the arguments within their organisation, about making arguments to their peers within the organisation. But then there is the top-down approach that, you know, as we mentioned before, has to come from, you know, Akivo, NCVO, VE, ABM, that not attacks literally, obviously, but attacks trustees and chief officers with the evidence about why volunteer management works, you know, and what are the risks involved in not properly investing in volunteering, because I don't think, if you do a risk analysis of volunteering, I don't think many organisations have properly understood the risks if you don't invest in supporting their volunteers properly.
Sure, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, John. I'm interested to know if we've got any comment coming in, or if anybody wants to ask John a question. Chris, have we got anybody? No? We've not got anybody. We have got someone with their hand up. No one with their hand up. No. I mean, I'm being asked to invite people to put their hand up. No, that's fine. I think, you know, we have had some quite good comment come through. I think Carl's asked a question, actually, John. I don't know if you want to take this on. It's going back to the issue of looking at donated time versus money. You know, when we were saying before on the poll about how that might be a kind of starting point as an issue. And his question is, you know, that side of it actually then takes more management in itself, and so people, you know, organisations may be put off just looking at that because going for the funds is sort of the easy option. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that that kind of build on what you've already said.
I think I might be taking a possibly controversial stance here.
Okay. Good. We've not had any controversy yet.
I'm not convinced of this donated time equals, you know, it has the same value of the donated money, because I used to be a chief officer.
Okay. And
at times, frankly, I needed money. It wasn't volunteers I needed, it was money I needed. And at other times, it was volunteers I needed. So I don't think we should be playing off volunteer time against, you know, the donation of money against each other. I think it's about the giving of something, and it's about working with organisations to understand different value, different types of donation give to it, whether that is money, whether that's knowledge, whether that's skills. And I would prefer to go down that route. And, you know, and in terms of Carl's point about, you know, actually the investment of time requires management. Yes, it does, and I think what our role is to show, well, yes, but the outcomes are so much more effectively. And I think us as a profession, if you like, even though, you know, we're not a profession at the moment, but just a profession, is to look at the different models of, well, if you invest this amount of management time and support into volunteers, your outcomes will be X. If you do it, this amount, your outcomes will be Y. And to demonstrate the value of, to be able to demonstrate the value of volunteer management. And I think that's what we lack at the moment. We can't show that.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying there about sort of unpacking what we actually mean when we say about the value of donated time. Like you say, is it skills, is it knowledge, is it? I think you're absolutely right. I think we do need to sort of peel that back and be much more specific. And indeed, what you're saying is, like, sometimes you do need to look for funding, and you need funds, and that's the bottom line. And sometimes it is about results. So maybe you're right. The education is there in sort of understanding that how volunteering and donated time has a value. Maybe it isn't just as simple as saying, it equals the other, because of course it isn't. It is far more complex than that. But giving it an equal value, perhaps in terms of worth and attention, in terms of what it can actually bring to the organisation. So we've got some other comments coming in, so you just bear with me while I just kind of assimilate that. People are saying that they agree with what Simon's saying, and I'm not looking at the right bit, clearly. John talked about cost-cutting in relation to volunteering. I know this is a contentious issue, particularly with some commentators. Could you clarify what you were talking about there? I don't know. I'll read it out again, John. John talks about cost-cutting in relation to volunteering. So do you know what that's referring to?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
Personally, send that in just to clarify. Was it something I said today or in a blog?
Or just ever? I don't know. I think what we'll do is we'll try and get a little bit more information on that comment, okay, and see if we can follow that one up. Well, oh yeah, no, you did say that today. Do you mean? Sorry, I'm just going to kind of throw that out to the person that's asked that, just to get a thing back about. Do you mean cost cutting in terms of cutting volunteering budgets, or sort of getting rid of volunteer managers? I'm just putting that out there to the person that asked that question to see if we can get any feedback to clarify. And in the meantime, we might do a poll. We'll play some music. I'd like to thank John. If you'd like to stick around, John, just for a little while, because we might have some more comment coming up, if that's okay. And we might be able to get some clarity on that question for you as well, if that's all right. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And we look forward to reading the extended version in your blog post. And looking forward to hearing your comments on Thoughtful Thursday. We do actually have a couple of people with their hands raised. You're not off the hook quite just yet. We've got Heather who wants to join us. I'll just see if she's there. Heather, hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi,
yes.
welcome. Do you have a question for John?
Well, it's not a question, it's just I wanted to say that I agreed with John about talking to the senior management team about the outcomes of volunteering, because I think as a senior manager I want to know that the best way to deliver a service and how can that be, and if that's with a volunteer, then delivering the service with volunteer management, then that is what I would go for if that worked out the best. And I work for Crohn's and Colitis UK, and we deliver a lot of our services through volunteers, and we're very much into volunteer management. So I think I'm coming from a different standpoint to a lot of people listening.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, John.
I would completely agree with Heather. I mean, I wrote guidance for volunteer management a couple of years ago, mainly for the age concern audience, about looking at how do you make the argument for volunteer management. And the bottom line was, well, it is all about how does it improve your outcomes for your organisation. But understanding what your organisational outcomes are, and then work to saying, well, if you invest in volunteer management, that is how you'll improve your outcomes. And obviously, the reverse might be true. Actually, it doesn't help improve your outcomes. Something else does. Yeah. And and I guess for most of us as organisations who deliver services, actually, what we exist to do is to support our beneficiaries in the best possible, not to support volunteering per se. And for us, it's to look at these different models and understand how volunteering does help best deliver our outcomes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you, Heather. Thank you. Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, just agree with everybody really, and I think the more links we can make with everybody, and if we rather than just trying to do these things individually, if we link together, then I think we'll end up making a better, having a louder voice out there, and how we do that is difficult, but maybe through the Association of Volunteer Managers. Just everybody link in there, and then we can work it out together.
Yes, I mean, I think definitely I would encourage sort of people listening and anybody who's listening to the playback of this sort of going forward, definitely to join the Association of Volunteer Managers, and I think also to join in the general sort of discussion and debates that are happening, the informal. So it's a bit like join in with the formal stuff that's there, because that's important. That's how you'll get that recognition and be part of something. But also, let's just keep the momentum going amongst ourselves as well, because I think the informal stuff's just as important in many ways. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Heather, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we have got a poll coming up for you based on a lot of the things that you've heard there from John and from Emma about getting involved. Just thought it'd be interesting, just as we're sort of wrapping up really, just to find out what is actually stopping you from getting involved in the wider volunteer management debate at the moment. Because, even hearing from someone like Emma, who is clearly taking steps in the last sort of 12 months to get involved, she's sort of sharing quite openly there about how that was quite a big deal. And we completely understand that. But, that's what people like me are here for, and people like the rest of the volunteer management community are here for. We're here to support you to do that, so please do make the most of it. So what are the things that kind of stop you at the minute? Is it that it takes up too much time? That you've built it into this thing it's going to be a time-consuming thing? Is it that, well, actually, I can't see the point, really? There is no point in that. That's for, you know, other people to discuss. Is it just a basic lack of confidence, you know, in what you have to say? I mean, I attended a volunteer managers network meeting just briefly on Monday evening, and that was one of the big things that the people were talking about. They were sort of saying they'd really like to comment and get involved, but they just don't have the confidence to do that. So what can we do about that? Is it that you're worried about what your organisation will say, or is it that you are involved? But like John was saying earlier, we can all do a bit more. So I think it's significant actually that, you know, you've all been merrily picking your choices whilst I've been waffling on there. It's significant that the majority of you are involved, but know you can do more, and that you're the people who've chosen to listen to the webinar. So I think that that's quite significant actually. So maybe what we need to think about is how do we then go and tell other people about perhaps listening to the webinar broadcast, perhaps thinking about how they're going to feed into the consultation. Have they even thought that this is an issue? Do they even understand, you know, the kind of potential implications of this? So, you know, there's an education that needs to happen there, sort of internally and amongst your own kind of peer networks. The other point that's coming up there actually in the feedback, which Chris is just displaying on the screen now, is that the lack of confidence is a big thing. So maybe as well we need to take time to reflect on what we can do about that. And what I said to the person that was flagging this up on Monday was, think about what needs to happen in order for you to take that step, and then do something about that, and know that this is a very supportive community, and know that, let people know that you're going to tweet or that you're going to make a blog comment. You can let me know if you like, and I'll look out for it, and I'll make a comment back, you know, in a supportive way. That's what the kind of thing that I'm here to do. John, you're still there. You've not gone to put the kettle on.
I was going to say, there are people out there who do lack the confidence to do something, then, you know, you can run something past Sue or myself or Emma, or there's quite a few people, you know, just to get that confidence, and we'll make sure, you know, we respond to whatever you say, because, you know, hopefully one of the outcomes from this webinar is that it will give people confidence to do something. And I'd hate to think in 6 months' time the same people still lack confidence. So do please get in touch.
Yeah, definitely. I do feel sometimes as though, you know, we're having the kind of the same conversations about these things, so let's not be having these same conversations in 6 months' time. So we've unmuted Emma as well. She's there to join us if she'd like to. I just thought it'd be a good idea to let her know I've done that in case she starts singing to herself or something. And we've got the kind of questions, comments, reflections. It's over to you. So that's there really. Emma, I don't know if you want to come back and say anything. It's okay if you don't. But if you've got any comments to make based on the discussion we've been having there.
Here, kind of in general. I just kind of agree with everything really.
I think that's the general kind of consensus, isn't it? We are all more or less, you know, kind of sort of individual kind of comment aside about particular specific issues, but generally, you know, we're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. Karen asked a really interesting question before about, you know, is anybody from Volunteering England or NCVO, you know, listening to the webinar? Not as far as we're aware. Are they interested in it? Well, we're certainly going to be pulling together a summary of what we've talked about, and probably sending them a copy if they're interested to sit and listen to it. I don't know. But we'll definitely be pulling together, you know, the kind of the strength of feeling and the specific opinions that have come out. So that is a task that Chris and I are going to follow up on. I'm just going to give people one last chance to join in or ask a question, if there is anything. No. Okay. Well, I hope that we've given everyone a challenge and something to think about. I want to thank John and I want to thank Emma very much for taking the time out to join us today and for their contributions. And thank you to you as well, because I know it's a lot of time out of your schedule, everyone. But hopefully you found it worthwhile and you're feeling a little bit more energised and inspired, if nothing else. What we need to know, though, is what is it that you're going to do next, because this is actually really, really important. So we've got one final poll for you to take part in. Obviously, there may be other specific things that you're going to do, but what we want to know is, are you going to give feedback to the merger consultation? Are you going to get more involved in the discussions on volunteer management? Are you going to start commenting and writing beyond your usual comfort zone? Are you going to join the Association of Volunteer Managers, or are you going to do some or all of the above? Please tell us you're going to do some or all of those things. That would be good to know. It's not all been in vain. Okay. We've got almost half of you are going to do all of the above. And we've got quite a lot of you are going to start commenting and writing beyond your usual comfort zone, which is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Hooray! I'm excited about reading the results of that. And then we've also got people going to be doing the other things as well. So we've got majority of you are going to be doing all of it, so we should be looking out for that. Excellent stuff. Well done, everybody. Final slide here, just it's more of an information piece really. It doesn't look that pretty, granted, but it's just to get you started with the web addresses for you to access the consultation. So that'll be coming up on your screen in a moment. The NCVO Volunteering England is a WordPress document. If you just put NCVO VE WordPress into Google, it comes up and you can go comment. You can go and do that now. You can go and put the kettle on and comment. Okay? If you want to find out about Thoughtful Thursdays, if you check out the blog piece that I did on Ivo about it, if you just look under the blogs under my name there, you can read all about Thoughtful Thursdays and how you can get involved. Join the Association of Volunteer Managers. It's very, very inexpensive. It's easy to do that. They did a fantastic conference earlier on this year, and I know that there are some changes happening with personnel, and I think that that is going to be a positive step, and there'll be more from them in the coming weeks and months. Please do join us on Twitter tomorrow for Thoughtful Thursday. The hashtag is TTVolMungers. It rolls off the tongue really easily. We're looking for some new tweeters, and if you want to take that step and write a blog, we're always looking for new bloggers on Thoughtful Thursday, and you can find us on Twitter there as well. You can also join us on the 5th of November for our next webinar. Write it in your diary. It's a Monday. What else would you be doing on a Monday? Because it is International Volunteer Managers Day on the 5th of November. So there's something for you to think about. And we're going to be writing about International Volunteer Managers Day. I've got some international contributors lined up during October with a great build-up to IVM Day. So there'll be things for you to get involved in there on a global scale. How fantastic will that be? Looking forward to reading people's comments on the consultation. I'd like to thank you all once again for joining us this afternoon, and take care.